back, people, and today we got another video going over why I think the Dolphins can actually replace Jonnu Smith's production pretty easily. I know some people see this loss and are actually quite worried about it, but when it comes to Jonnu, and I don't want to take anything away from Jonnu, he's a good player, but there's a lot of reasons where I think like this isn't as big a deal as some people are making it out to be. And it makes a lot of sense to not want to pay him and like trade him away while his value is probably at his highest based off last year. So once they added Jonnu, I was actually a big fan of the addition. I think the Dolphins need an underneath yak threat at the tight end position, but it should have been in a supporting role. And I think, you know, as like that third, fourth option going into games. But based on how the season played out, the Dolphins couldn't run the ball and they couldn't take downfield shots. And that raised the guys' values of players like Jonnu and Achane getting these underneath targets. Like Jonnu had like 23 of his catches were like behind the line or at or behind the line of scrimmage. And then like a lot of them were also like under 7 yards. Those are a lot of low value touches that are helpful in certain situations. But that's something you want to see like when you're able to like push the ball down the field, take those open spaces in more niche situations. The Dolphins were just forced to make that the main component of their offense due to the things we were talking about, you know, lack of O-line play across the board. So it almost made Jonnu's value raise too much because they gave him too many low-value targets, and that's something clearly the Dolphins don't want to do in 2025. They want to be able to take more downfield shots, you know, go back to the Tyreek Waddle, be able to run the ball. And then the Dolphins also have players on the rosters that can potentially do a lot of the stuff Jonnu did, but even add more value. Clearly, 11 personnel is a thing too. Dolphins want to run more 11 personnel, and when you're in 11 personnel, that means one tight end's on the field. Unless it's an obvious passing situation, you don't really want Jonnu on the field as your 11 personnel tight end because it makes your offense predictable. He has pretty much no blocking ability, and that's pretty valuable to the Dolphins' offense. So he was really only valuable, and like he's really good in those yak areas. Like he's one of the best tight ends in the league as a yak threat, but it almost made him like a one-trick pony. And even with him having like his greatest season in the NFL, the Dolphins offense still was not very good. Now it would have been nice to still have him as a supporting piece, sure, but not to give him that extension that he received. So going over some of these players, I think their two main ones are actually receivers. We can talk a little bit about Darren Waller. Darren Waller 2 was added. I actually think, you know, even though Darren Waller and Jonnu Smith play the same position, they're both like big slot receivers, F tight ends. They're actually quite different. Waller was more of like a field stretcher guy. I think, you know, he can bring a little more value in the red zone than maybe Jonnu did, but that's kind of like losing Jonnu, I think, hurts some red zone value, but you have other players that can take that like Waller. But outside of that, I actually think the other players, and I'll have some clips play through here, are Nick Westbrook-Ikhine and Malik Washington. And I really want to start with Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Really good value signing of this offseason, and I think he is someone that can really place Johnny's production while also adding other value. Like he only had, you know, he didn't have a crazy amount of catches last year, but he had great red zone value, 9 touchdowns. So he brings that value. But you also see some of the other like stuff underneath, some yak ability. He's a big receiver, so he can do some of that stuff. He's actually a better blocker than Jonnu is underneath as a threat. You know, can do some chip. They've even, you know, insert him in like C gaps and stuff. I think that's an interesting value that can be added. And he can be on the field and play as a big slot in 11 personnel, while you can still have a tight end on the field. And Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is more of a field stretcher. That value's added. And he's much more fit to play a supporting role. And you got him on just like a really nice contract for a receiver that's going to be like your 3rd/4th guy. So yeah, I love the NWI value pick that he brings. There's a lot to like with his game. And yes, even though like, when the Dolphins traded away Jonnu, like I was thinking about, yeah, the Dolphins should add a tight end, but I was looking for wide tight ends to really get over on like Pharaoh Brown or Julian Hill, because people will talk about like, oh, trading away Jonnu means we're going to see more Pharaoh Brown and Julian Hill. I don't think that's the case. They didn't really play the same position. Like when I talked about adding Tyler Warren, like in the draft, because I was interested in Tyler Warren, I love taking Kenneth Grant too, but I also would have been down for Tyler Warren because he plays a different position. People are like, we can't take him. We have Jonnu. I'm like, Jonnu does not play wide tight end. He's not really a tight end in this roster. He barely ever played in line, and when he did play in line, he was very rarely blocking. So you can replace like that big slot type of player that Jonnu was with a combination of Darren Waller and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Jonnu is probably better yak than those guys, but Nick's got enough yak ability while still bringing better blocking. He has those toughness over the middle of the field catches. He's a great red zone threat. And then how you can also replace the yak / underneath stuff is with the other receiver we're talking about, Malik Washington. Very different sizes and builds, obviously, much a smaller receiver, but he's almost got like a running back type build. We've seen him as a returner, and he's very comfortable with the ball in his hands, like great contact balance. He is a underneath threat that can make a play as a screen target, was very comfortable in screen, probably your best receiver in screen situations. And then also like he can be like a short yardage possession, convert third downs. That's another area I think Jonnu had some success, was converting third downs. That's a Nick Westbrook-Ikhine and Malik, I think, both bring value here. I think they're both pretty like sure-handed, reliable, get to the right spot type of players, which I think is big. And Malik had some success, converting some third downs, being an underneath threat, picking up like nice pieces of yak, especially even was in like the best position. And I think if the Dolphins are able to run the ball, running the ball is the key. We've talked about it big time. That will allow more downfield stuff. And if the downfield stuff is open like it was in 2023, the Dolphins didn't have the underneath threats to take like advantage of that outside of, the Waddle, Tyreek, Achane sort of trio. But those guys were more making the big plays. Having guys like Nick Westbrook-Ikhine and Malik Washington, if those other guys are creating space and you're able to take downfield shots and those guys are underneath in certain situations, maybe the downfield shot's taken away in certain plays, then you can really take advantage of space. And I think, they all have that sort of ability. I actually think it's probably the best receiver room in like the McDaniel era, like all around. Like if Tyreek and Waddle play up to their potential as well, because, they've been here the whole time. There's still a lot to like. So yeah, I think his production is actually, like, even though he played a good season, he had some great moments. The OT touchdown versus the Jets, like that's such a great moment. But a lot of his production was underneath yak stuff, and it got overvalued because of how much they did it. And that's not how you want to run this offense. You want that to be supporting, and the Dolphins have guys in those supporting roles that can do that stuff. And for the extension he was going to get, it just didn't make sense to pay him that type of money. So they traded him away while his value was highest. And he's also 30 plus a Dolphin, or he's turning, he is 30. So the Dolphins are trying to find, they've been trying to get younger. Most of the people they've added this offseason were under the age of 30. And a lot of the guys, they had like the youngest draft. And free agency wise, I think they only added like 2 people that were maybe in their 30s, and everyone else was like 27, 28, pretty young players. And then, the 11 personnel stuff is also very important to this picture. 11 personnel, if you don't know what that means, it stands for 1 running back, 1 tight end. So the first number is your running back, so 1 running back. Second number is the tight end, and that usually means 3 receivers on the field. Dolphins have not been a very heavy 11 personnel team. 11 personnel is probably the most common run personnel package in the league, but the Dolphins are actually towards the low end. They actually run a lot of 21, which is 2 running backs, 1 tight end. They've ran more 12, especially last year with, Jonnu on the team. But I think they kind of want to get away from that, spread things out, and then have receiver skill sets that can run full route trees like Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but can fit in and do some of the blocking stuff to replace Jonnu. And then you have other players that can do a lot of that stuff. And they also, like, even their UDFAs or like big receivers that can maybe even do some of that stuff if they end up making the team. You got Waller. So all around, that's not something that I think will be a big concern of the offense. Last year, Jonnu played great, and the offense still wasn't very good. I think, the offense is going to be clicking. It's going to be because Tua stays healthy and the O-line stays healthy and they're able to run block. That happens, the offense will find success whether Jonnu was here or not. So it's one reason I'm not tripping too much about it, even though I think, congratulations to Jonnu. I think this was his last chance to get a nice little big, bump payday because of his age. And he had a good season, so he deserves it. I hope he has a, solid year with the Steelers. I think he will with Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith has been his other best years in the NFL besides this most previous one with McDaniel. And I've just wanted an all-around tight end for a while. We still don't have it. Someone that can do everything. It's very hard to find those George Kittle types. That's why you see George Kittle thrive in San Francisco, because that's the type of tight end you're looking for, but they're very rare. So maybe one day the Dolphins will be able to find that, but who knows? They could be to a whole different staff and a whole different fit with what you're looking for at tight end. So if you guys really do like, comment, subscribe, next time. Peace.